Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday, April 29th, and this is the Elevate Academy. The Elevate Academy is a place for student athletes, parents of student athletes, coaches, leaders, business leaders, you name it. It's for people to get together to help elevate each other. We bring you some of the best athletes, coaches, business leaders, influencers in the sports world, and today we have a great one. We have George Pyne. George, welcome to the Elevate Academy.
Great to be here. I hope I can elevate my game today.
Well, I think you're going to. So just to give everyone a quick overview, George is the founder of Bruin Sports Capital. It's a company that's focused on building a new generation of world-class sports, entertainment, and media. He's got plenty of experience in that area. He's the former president of IMG, the global monster that IMG is, and George ran the show as the president there. He was also the COO of NASCAR. And he's also a former Ivy League football player, all Ivy League football player at Brown University. So, George, we definitely know you're going to elevate it today. So where are you coming from? Where are you broadcasting from today?
I'm live from New Canaan, Connecticut.
Live from New Canaan, Connecticut. So not too far away. Obviously, this is a crazy time. And, we were talking off the air right beforehand. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Bruin Sports right now.
Well, right now we operate our 5 portfolio companies that actually operate in 30 countries. We have offices in 18 countries around the world. And it's a wide range of businesses, all the way from streaming games to doing things around live events, design, data, and running OTT networks. So it's kind of a broad spectrum across the sports business.
Well, what's interesting is that I think I caught you recently, maybe a month or so ago on CNBC. Was that?
Yes.
I know you're on the air a lot, but one of the things that obviously sports is super affected by all this right now, but the one that's not affected is esports. And you were talking about esports on CNBC. Tell me a little bit more about are you guys looking at that as something that for the future?
We've invested in esports. We have another venture called Courtside Venture. I'm the chairman there. We've invested in different esports businesses. Esports is sticky, meaning it connects well with you. It has a great demo. It's global. And, esports has had a good run during the coronavirus. I mean, an example of that would be the iRacing League that's been on Fox that's drawing 900,000 viewers for watching people race cars via esports. So, and then if anyone here has young teenage boys, they know that they're playing Fortnite or other games at night as well. So esports is new, growing, and global.
Well, I would tell you, teenage girls are playing Fortnite too. I'll tell you that. I know that. So, one of the things that, for the listeners out there to get a view of, inside the George Pyne head here, you come from a long line. And according to Tom Towers, a great Brown lacrosse player, Tom says that you are the only family of 3 generations of NFL players. Is that true?
Well, we were the first 3-generation NFL family. And now I think there's been 1 or 2 others, but my granddad played in the NFL. My dad
Who do you play for? Who do you play for?
My granddad played for the Providence Steamrollers in the 1930s.
Providence Steamrollers.
Boston Patriots, my dad played for. And my brother Jim played 9 years, started 100 games in the NFL. And then my brother Dave played at Lafayette. Obviously, I played at Brown, so it's been a big part of our family.
Yeah. So, and then besides obviously the football and as a player, but now you have kids that are all involved in sports, and your son is going to be going to. He's now at Notre Dame, right? Freshman.
Yes. So I have two boys. My older boy graduated early from Brown, started 3 years with the football team there. He's actually took a scholarship and going to go play at the University of Buffalo. They have a Division I football team, actually won a bowl game last year, been to 2 straight bowls, a really good program there. And then my younger son, Drew, enrolled at Notre Dame as an early enrollee in January. And unfortunately had one day of spring practice and the virus.
They sent him home. They sent him home.
Drew's a quarterback, and Brendan was a linebacker.
It's interesting. University of Buffalo, that's a program that really, kind of came onto the map only in the last few years. They've really turned the program around, but it's amazing that when you throw a great coach into the mix, what that coach can do in elevating that program to, as you said, winning bowl games.
Yeah, Lance Leopold won 6 national championships in Division III, and he's completely transformed the Buffalo program. They play in the MAC. They played for the MAC championship 2 years ago, lost. And this year they returned 15 starters on a team that won a bowl game, and they should be very good. So we're excited about watching our son play there. They play at Ohio State, Kansas State, West Point, plus the MAC schedule. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And then now in regards to you getting involved in, when you were a senior at Brown, what were you thinking of doing? We had a lot of student athletes that watch the show, and, what this is really about is it's about the entire student athlete, mind, body, game, life. It's not just about the 4 years that you're going to play in college. It's the 40 plus years of what are you going to do afterwards. What were you in the mindset of thinking of doing when you were a senior at Brown?
I never really knew what I wanted to do, to be quite honest with you.
Same here.
And I actually went to work in a family business for 2 years, was unhappy, and I got some great advice at the Brown Career Office. I remember walking in, and I didn't lack for confidence in those days. And I walked in and said, "Look at me, I was this, I was that, and here's my resume." And the lady gave me great advice at the career office. She said, tear up your resume, here's the alumni book, pick up the phone and start calling people. And when you call people, ask for advice, don't ask for a job. And it was the best advice I've ever got, because she was right. And in essence, you're going to do that. I've been doing that my whole life. So it was great. I called, I networked the Brown alumni. I found a quarterback in Atlanta, Georgia, who was the president of the Bar Association. When we came out of school, the economy was really bad. It's like a real estate depression in the Northeast. And this guy set up a bunch of interviews, and I got a job out of the interviews. But the key lesson was using the network and not asking for something, asking for advice. And then also asking someone for 3 people. So who else do you think I could talk to for advice? And I think that was a great advice to me she gave.
It's amazing, actually. And it's one of the things I think that, any student athlete, as you're listening, and I had the same exact thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was coming out of Brown, and my high school chaminade offered me a job coaching and teaching. I think it was $12,000 a year. Dom Starsha talked to me about coming back and being assistant coach. I think that was like $9,000 a year. And I was like, all right, you know what? Everyone's heading towards Wall Street. I think I'm going to go the Wall Street route. But what Dom Starsha had done was he introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Bill Meckel, who was Brown class of '66. And Bill, to this day, is one of my really close friends and mentors. And he basically said exactly what the advice you got. And he said, I don't want to send you out on interviews. What I want you to do is I want you to just go meet with people and get advice from them and talk to them. And that's exactly what I did. I went on meetings. They weren't interviews. And from those, jobs came.
And that's what I do now. And, I see people when I don't want something. And so what happens if you're seeing people when you don't want something, maybe once in 5 years you might want something, but if you've been a good person for 5 years and the one time you ask, it's easy to ask. If it's in the other way, if all you're doing is asking, people get tired of you. So it's something that I've taken with me my whole life, but it really was great advice.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's now. How did you get started in sports though? How did you get, how did you go from football and then end up being the COO of NASCAR?
It's kind of a crazy journey. One of the other
we want to hear it.
One of the other things is, follow the opportunity. Don't go for the money. And so I actually was offered a job at Fleet Bank in Providence, which later on became a bigger bank I bought up. But got a job at Fleet Bank. And then in Atlanta, I had this opportunity to work for the Chamber of Commerce, studying the public schools. And on the board were all the presidents of the big companies. And they said, look, if you come down here, you do a good job, somebody was going to hire you. And, you know, the job in New England was like $40,000, and the job in Atlanta was $18,000. And I had $5,000. I was newly married 1 year. I got married young, and had 2 cars. I had a car that had 170,000 miles. Only 2 of the 4 doors open in the car. And my wife's car had 90,000 miles, no air conditioning. And I took the job in Atlanta because I thought I could leap up higher. If I did a good job, one of those guys would hire me. And that's what happened. I took the opportunity to present to the presidents of big companies. I did a good job, and I got hired to become the president of the Portman Company in Atlanta, Georgia, which was one of the biggest real estate firms in the world, and built 27 buildings in downtown Atlanta and projects all over the world, working for the president, doing strategic planning and representing them in downtown civic politics. And then I had this idea, because we owned all these buildings and it was a bad economy, that we ought to go in the sports business. My boss was like, you know, you're crazy, because we had an event company, a trade show event company. I said, look, we got all these empty office buildings, Super Bowl's coming, the Olympics is coming in Atlanta. You know, let's do events. And my boss said, no. And then finally he said, well, as long as it doesn't get in the way of everything else you're doing, you can do it. And so I launched a sports business there, and then signed up NASCAR as a client, and then got hired by NASCAR in 1995. And NASCAR was really small. We had one office. It was called Winston Cup Racing, and I went in.
Family-owned business.
Family-owned business. I went in as a business development guy on the commercial side. And the lucky news for me was nobody cared about the commercial side. NASCAR was supposed to be an officiating body, not commercial. So I was like 4 people, and really hit the thing at the right place at the right time. And we really grew the commercial capability and grew the business overall, and then ended up going on the board and running the company. So it was, so the lessons, I think, were don't follow the money, follow the opportunity, look at a growth market. You know, New England was depressed. Atlanta was booming with the Olympics and Super Bowl coming. And then even NASCAR, to me, I thought was, I had a friend of mine who was a local golfer, Billy Andrade. He and his wife were very kind to us when we moved to Atlanta. We didn't know anybody. And his wife came home every night talking about NASCAR is growing, NASCAR is doing this, NASCAR is doing that, because she was taking a class at Georgia State. And so I was like, let's go down there and sell these guys something. And I believed at that time NASCAR was a growth market. So network, don't take the money, follow the opportunity, and then go to a growth market. That's what I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. But, you know, at NASCAR, you know, everyone kind of now, it's almost synonymous. When you don't hear the word just NASCAR, you hear, you know, NASCAR Nextel Sprint, you know, and at the time, that Nextel Sprint deal, to create that with NASCAR, that was the biggest sponsorship in sports history. And I know you were one of the architects to bring that in. What was that like to literally bring in a sponsorship that was going to change the sport for NASCAR?
Well, it was fun. We had RJR Tobacco had been a sponsor for a long time, but because of the issues with tobacco, they had to leave. So we really saw it as an opportunity, and we went out and called and did a bunch of presentations, and finally we got Nextel. The funny thing about Nextel was I didn't think we were charging enough, so I went with the CEO, and I was the COO of the company. And my boss didn't go to the meeting for the presentation because no one ever thought we would sell Nextel. So we upped the price because I didn't think we were charging enough. And the guy took the price. He goes, I want this, and I'm going to buy it. And it was transformative for us. And, you know, NASCAR was a great run. It was a lot of fun. I was there for 10 years. And, you know, when we went in, it was Winston Cup. When we went out, it was NASCAR. We went in, it was tobacco. You know, we had consumer products, auto parts to consumer products. We were on a thing called the Nashville Network when I got there. When I left, we were on NBC and Fox. So it was a great run. And more than anything, the people were so nice. Those race car drivers are as nice as they seem. And when I left NASCAR, I actually cried. I was 40 years old. I cried. I hated leaving the place, but I wanted to go do something else. I wasn't a car guy. My wife taught me how to drive a stick shift, and I don't know, I just didn't see myself at one place for 20 years. But I loved it, and it's certainly one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Well, one thing that's incredible, too, is, you know, you talk about sports and, you know, what we're missing right now. You know, you're missing the live sports. Me as a coach, I'm missing being out on the field with the kids. but it's that passion. It's the passion that sports brings to the table. And I remember at the time I was president of the Long Island Lizards, and we were putting together a demographic study to go out to sponsors and try to sell sponsors on. And our demographic study, we always used to say, is we're the second most passionate fan base there is, only second to NASCAR. And so you have those passionate fans. It must have been pretty interesting, going out to these sponsors to be able to say, we literally have the most passionate fans. I mean, and the number of fans was just incredible.
Well, it grew over time. When we first went in, everyone slammed the door in our face. And so we had to try harder because we weren't natural like the NBA or the NFL. We were kind of the upstart. But over time, that really changed. I'll tell you a funny story about making the claim to be number 2. So we had a press conference one year, every year before the season. It was a big group. And I told my guys, I said, we're going to get up there. I'm getting up there, and I'm going to claim that we're the number 2 sport in America. And everyone said, you're nuts, which I was. And so I got up on the stage and and I said, look, NASCAR by attendance and by television viewership is the number 2 sport in America. And the next day, half the country said, that guy is crazy. And the other half said, hey,
he's right.
He's got a point. And so from that point on, we claimed being number 2. Now, I'm not sure whether we were or we weren't, but that's what we claimed. And it's funny about, when you make different claims. So I always remember that number 2 claim.
So then, the next step is, you're going to leave NASCAR and you're being courted to become the president of IMG. What was that like? It's got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, well, when you go through, it's very similar to the networking, for the kids and for everybody. So I became friendly with some guys at Goldman Sachs, and whenever I went up to New York when I was at NASCAR, I stopped by and saw these guys. And when I was in New York, they said, hey, you got to go meet this guy, Ted Forsman. And, I didn't even really know who Ted was. And I went in and met Ted for thought it was going to be half an hour. It was 2 hours. And Ted had bought IMG about 13 or 14 months before. And, he pursued me pretty heavily. And when, think about relationships in life and how you do things, the first investor for Ted when he started, Ted bought and sold 39 companies. He's in a movie. He's had books written about him. He was one of the early pioneers of private equity. And one of his first investors was Roger Penske. And Roger, obviously, I worked with at NASCAR. So the minute I walked out of Ted's office, I think before, he had already spoken, to Roger, who was one of his first investors. So I went to IMG. I was 40 years old. I was very young for that job at the time. I worked for people that Ted was in his late 60s, but I figured I would learn a lot with Ted. And then obviously IMG was in 30 countries, and I thought I would learn. It was a broader job and learn a lot. So it was a great opportunity. It was very challenging because to go in a global organization at 40 years old, working for an icon in private equity and having to restructure and reorganize was quite an experience for me. So I learned a lot. I mean, NASCAR, we kind of built from the bottom up, and at IMG, I kind of had to restructure from the top down. So it was a great learning experience, and I find myself quoting Ted because my office was next to Ted every day. So he would come in, and he was not easy, by the way. He had Ted fired Don Rumsfeld, he fired Irkston Bowles, he fired someone who went on to be the CEO of General Motors. So he was a tough guy, but I lasted with him longer than anyone else in 39 companies, and it was a great learning experience for me, not just in sports, but really in business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, I know one of the interactions that we had during that time was you had me go down to the IMG Academy, which started out as the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy. And, going back to trends and, what's growing is, your question was, can you add lacrosse as a sport to the IMG Academy? And, a couple of weeks ago, we had Tom Marachek, who's the new director of lacrosse at the IMG Academy, on this show, talking about the recruiting landscape and what's going on. And IMG is, I have my first kid that it's one of the girls who played for me. She's now down at the IMG Academy. Just referred one of the boys that I know his dad real well, and he's going to be going to the IMG Academy to do a PG year. But the IMG Academy itself, like as a former athlete, it's literally like athletic nirvana there. It's such an interesting place.
Yeah, I was the favorite part of my job at IMG because work was work and it was never easy. But IMG was a place where everybody was trying to become great. Everyone was competitive, and no matter who you were, if you were Maria Sharapova, she was there. She was trying to get better. When I was there, Cam Newton, you'd see him working hard. So you see these elite athletes and the effort that they put in, and whether it's an elite athlete or somebody that was playing Division III, everybody in that place was trying to get better. So to me, it was uplifting. When we went there, when we took it over, it was primarily the Bolletary Tennis Academy and the Ledbetter Golf. And what we did was we repositioned, and it was really kind of a feeder system for people to represent. And we looked at it and said, look, for every Maria Sharapova, there's 2,000 people that aren't Maria Sharapova. But we have a great product here, and we can help people get into college, and we can help people improve their capabilities. So we really
go pro.
And we really transformed it from that standpoint. And then they forgot about America. So we, I have to say, I'll take the credit. Lacrosse and football, I said, hey, we got to get lacrosse was perfect. I mean, a higher end demo, not very expensive in terms of equipment. Let's get in lacrosse. Football, I wanted to get into because I thought it would help with the exposure. Baseball, and then even trying to build up the basketball thing, which they've done now. Soccer, women's soccer, right, which could have been which I felt was a real growth. So that, when we took it over, we rebranded it to IMG Academy with a real focus on these other sports. And it's really taken off. I mean, now they have a hotel. I mean, the facilities are second to none. And, my older boy, Brendan, went there. After I had left, he went. And he had a great experience, got into Brown, and had a great experience. So I think it's a terrific place. They do a great job with the kids. I think when I was there, and I'm sure it's the same now, is 60% of the kids went on to play Division I. 98% went on to play college. So I think it was a great place. If you like athletics, and by the way, they still get kids into Stanford and Navy and West Point, Annapolis, West Point.
Harvard. I mean, Syracuse.
Syracuse,
ended the NCAA lacrosse season. They were number 1 in the country on the men's. They had 4 players on the team, including starting goalie, all came out of the IMG Academy.
Right. So that's a great. I thought it was, personally, I liked it. I liked it as a parent. After I had left IMG, I liked it as an employee. It's a great place.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was down there, I had lunch with Jamie Moyer, the pitcher from the Phillies, and he was telling me that when he was down there to train himself and get ready for the season. And when he was down there, he was telling me about his boys, who neither one of his younger boys played baseball. They came down with him. And they're like, Dad, if we lived here, we would play baseball. And he's like, okay, I'm buying a house. And you guys are going to go to the IMG Academy. And they did, which is kind of cool.
The great part of the place, what you learn, is so much of the mental aspect of sports. I mean, Nick Bolletary, who was an incredible guy, used to say 70% of the tennis match is won or lost when the ball's not in play. So just the whole mental focus, the idea of prehab instead of rehab, meaning understanding what your weaknesses are in your body and building up those weaknesses and then accentuating the positives. Just the whole thing, the whole environment of everybody being great. And again, no matter where you are on that scale, I mean, I think we thought it was pretty cool. You'd be out, there's Cam Newton, or there's Maria Sharapova or Serena Williams.
Well, I remember one specific story. I was down there with you. We were down in Miami, and we were going out to dinner, and we were waiting for you. And I was with the head of sports psychology from IMG, and I was having a drink with him and his wife. And he said, excuse me, I got to go talk to one of our tennis people. And I see this woman walking over, and literally her waist is like this and just goes out to like these shoulders. And she's walking over, and she's got her head hanging down. And I watched him, get into a session with her right then and there. And what the gist of it was, she had been interviewed by a Miami Herald reporter, and she said, yeah, I'm in a little bit of a slump right now. And he's like, you're never in a slump. You're working on your swing. You're changing your swing.
Right.
You're never in a slump, because tomorrow you're going to read the Miami Herald and it's going to say, I'm in a slump right now, and you're going to believe it. But the mental side of it was just phenomenal.
And you can tell, I took a lot of it in for work. You're exactly right. So they would show films of people like Tiger Woods or Roger Federer never answering a question negative. even myself, so I'm 40 years old, president of IMG, and my age was an issue. Everyone used to make fun of my age. So I went down to the guy's name was Trevor, and I went to Trevor and I said, Trevor, I went through the mental conditioning. He goes, what bothers you? I said, what bothers me is people always making fun of I'm too young. And he said to me, he goes, you know, if you're good enough, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And I was in a meeting with my peers who were all older than me, and I said that, and never again did anyone say anything about my age. I shut it right down. And so, you know, whether you're an athlete or you're a parent or you're at work, that mental conditioning does apply beyond just athletics.
Well, you know, it's a great topic that you're talking about, because so much of, you know, what we talk about here is it's not just the high school years you're playing, the 4 years you may be in college, and if you're lucky enough to maybe go pro or whatever, obviously, but most of those are very short careers as well. You know, even, you know, your brother Jim, you know, how many years did Jim play in the NFL?
9.
9. You know, 9, and that's a long career in the NFL, but it's only 9 years. And then it's, you know, what are you doing after that? What are the aspects of sport that you learned on the field, in practices, from coaches that you brought into business with you?
I think probably the best thing was how to dealing with failure. You know, I have the saying, like, I like getting knocked down because I like getting back up. And that competitive aspect really comes from sports. Now, obviously for me, you know, I wanted to play in the NFL. I wasn't good enough. My dad and my granddad all the same names. I'm the first guy with that name that didn't make the NFL. And sports was very important to me, and football was. So, you know, that competitive drive, you know, and dealing with failure and being able to overcome it. I find that athletes typically, because they're used to competition, can deal with failure better. Whereas somebody else who's not failed before or failed a lot or has not struggled, you know, it's a little bit different for them. So I think the number one thing is just dealing with failure, overcoming failure, and competing. That makes athletes special. And that's why a lot of firms look to hire athletes, because of that experience, working with teammates, working well with others, and being competitive. Those are skills that really do translate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, the interesting thing is, as you're talking about that, you know, you mentioned earlier about, you know, not being afraid to ask for 3 other people who you might be able to speak to. And I think that's, you know, part of the confidence that you learn on the field, to be able to say, okay, this is something I want to ask for it. And I know this is such a simple quote, but I saw it the other day. They said, if you never ask, the answer is always no.
That's right. And look, getting over rejection. Everybody is going to get rejected. And most people get rejected often. So how do you deal with that? Do you crumble down, or do you pick yourself back up and go? And, you know, in athletics, you're probably going to get a fair amount of rejection no matter how good you are. And then you also have the experience of overcoming that rejection. And so to me, having that confidence and being able to deal with that, I think, you know, is a great thing that you learn in athletics.
Yeah, well, we're going to be having a guest, 2 guests are going to be coming on. They're actually, one's a doctor, and it's all about the sports psychology, the mental side of things, and preparing for that, which is I'm pretty excited about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. But now I want to talk about, switching gears a little bit, is obviously you've been super successful in business and you've done an amazing job. But how has it been as an athlete who played at a very high level, who did a great job? How is it now as a parent looking at your kids and watching them play? You know, did you have to change any of your behaviors to be a good sports parent?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard, like for every other parent, letting go and watching your kids. I really tried to focus on what I learned from IMG was the process of, you know, how hard are you training? How hard are you practicing? And it's hard for every parent, right? Because there's nothing you can do. When your kid's out there playing, they got to go play.
Right.
And obviously, when someone says something about your kid that you don't like, you know, you can't. I'd love to say you don't listen to it, but you do a little bit, and you have to learn not to listen to it. So It's been great. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And quite honestly, I care more about my kids than my work. And I've got two girls that are fantastic. My oldest daughter was captain of our high school team in field hockey, and a really good athlete. I have a younger daughter that is in acting. So I'm proud of all my kids, and I'm competitive with all my kids. I want to encourage them to go out and be successful. At the end of the day, though, as you know, they got to want it too, because if they don't want to do it, they should find something else to do, because it's too hard and too competitive. That drive from a kid has to come from inside them.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, it gets back to the passion too. And, you have to have the passion for it. If you don't have that passion, it's the same thing if you don't have a passion for what you're doing with work. Are you getting up every day and, looking at the alarm clock and going, I can't believe I have to go do this today? Or are you getting up with a spring out of bed and saying, I get to do this today?
Right.
That's
and it's
the big
so
difference.
much now. I mean, a 12-month thing, even more than when we grew up. I mean, so one of the things my daughters don't like is that we talk about football probably every day, 365 days a year in our house, because, what are you eating? Are you sleeping enough? Did you lift today? How'd you do? Like my son Drew now is home from Notre Dame, and, he has like 3 or 4 tests a week on the playbook. How'd you do on the test? Are you going to throw today? Did you run? What's your weight? Have you, all that stuff. So it's a 365-day endeavor. And, so it's hard not to be passionate, but at the end of the day, the kid's got to do it. You can't do it for 'em.
Yeah. I mean, but that's also, one of the things too, that the beauty of sport too, is it's also the camaraderie. It's the, those teammates that you play and train with side by side every single day, and you create those relationships. And it's one of the things that I try to really put in perspective for kids who are thinking about going to play college sports. And listen, just as what you're talking about with Drew going Division I at Notre Dame, and we're talking about Notre Dame football, people, like this is like as high level as you can get. It's a full-time job. It's a full-time commitment. Division I's not for everyone. There are plenty of kids that we have encouraged to go Division II and Division III, but it's still a level of commitment that you really have to. And as parents, your kids have to want it.
Right. You can't fabricate. It's just too much hard work. And to me, like, I never really, to me, it doesn't matter whether it's 1, 2, or 3, because even Division III these days, you got to put a lot of effort in. It's a full-time endeavor, and the competition's high. So it's competitive at all levels.
But one of the questions, so with the Elevate Academy, one of the things that we always do is we have questions from our prior guests. Our prior guest was ESPN lacrosse and college football reporter and analyst Paul Carcaterra. And what Paul wanted to ask of you was, what's it like being the parent of the quarterback, the one who everyone's watching? And he also referenced it. He goes, I also look at it as it's the same thing as being the parent of a goalie, where, a lot falls on their shoulders. And, did you see yourself being different because of the position that Drew played?
Yeah, well, I have to say, I have a lot more empathy for goalies and pitchers, because you can't hide, right? And so being the parent of a quarterback, the other thing, having the 3 generations, now 4, playing football, I used to think every position was equally the same and equally important. But I have to say, the guy that touches the ball every play is an important guy, because if he goes the wrong way, even on a running play, it's not going to be a good play. So much of playing quarterback is mental. So much of it is understanding things, and then confidence. And it's really easy when you're a quarterback not to have confidence, because there's so much speculation about how you play. Like, I was a lineman. No one really knew whether I played well or not, let's be honest.
Right.
But if you're a quarterback and you fumble, or you throw 3 picks, or you don't make the pass you're supposed to make, everybody comments on it, right?
All eyes are on you.
And really, you probably get too much credit, but you also get too much blame. And so working with my son on that is a really important element of playing quarterback. And really where he netted out on all this is he tunes out everything. And he doesn't read the articles. He doesn't read the good articles. He doesn't read the bad articles. And he just, tries his best. So we were down, he played in the Under Armour All-American game, and we would text back and forth. And he goes, look, he goes, I'm going to go out here. I'm trying my best. That's all I can do. And I'm like, that is all you can do. And
Yeah.
so we have this, someone gave me this advice once, your best is good enough. And I think that's really good advice too. So as long as you're trying your best, that's all you can do. But you really do have to tune out the good and the bad. And someone told me once, things are never as good or as bad as they are. That's probably true as well. But tuning out what other people say about you at a quarterback position or a goalie
Yeah.
or a pitcher,
Well,
I
listen,
think
it's
you
also
have to.
it's also super hard in the current environment that we're in. When you and I were in college, we didn't have social media. You didn't have everyone up your butt 24 hours a day, critiquing you and letting you know. I mean, I was just watching the TED Talk with Brene Brown, and she's talking about grit, and she's talking about overcoming adversity, and she puts out this amazing TED Talk that literally millions of people have seen. And then she said, one of the things she talks about is the negative comments on there. Like, someone saying to her, well, how can you give us any advice? Look at your body, and talking about what she looked like. And like someone said, get back in the kitchen to her. And here she is, and she's like, I'm reading this and it's affecting me. So she's like, so I don't read it anymore.
Right. And for my son Drew in particular, being able to tune that out and go out and play at a high level is a really great attribute for the rest of your life. Meaning, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to be a good teammate, I'm focused on what's important, and these other things people say about me or whatever, I'm really not going to let them sway me too much. I'm going to stay true to my convictions. That's a good thing to learn for the rest of your life, right? And being a good teammate, the importance of that, and being a leader, those are good lessons especially when you're under attack. Anyone can do it when everyone's saying you're wonderful, or how talented you are. Give me people that under fire can walk that walk. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's just great advice too. So our next guest on the show is Digit Murphy. So Digit was the longtime Brown University women's hockey coach. At the time when she was the coach, she was the all-time NCAA wins leader. She's been a commentator for the Olympics for women's hockey. She's traveled all over the world. She just did some coaching stints in China. And last Wednesday, she was just named the new president of the brand new Toronto WNHL franchise. Wow. So what is your question for Digit Murphy, who's going to be on the show on Friday?
So when you're evaluating a prospect, what are the three most important elements you're looking for?
Love it. Well, what I'm going to be very interested in hearing what she says is, I just did a survey of NCAA coaches, and we sent out a survey to men's and women's college lacrosse coaches, and we gave 8 different characteristics. First of all, we asked, what characteristics are you looking for? Then we asked them to rank them in 2 separate surveys. So it'll be interesting to see what she has about that. We've added another question, which I didn't tell you about. And the other question is, it's a crazy time right now, what we're going through. Businesses are shut down, sports are shut down. What's the silver lining in all of this for George Pyne?
Well, one, I think you want to be, whoever you're, empathetic, because this is devastating, particularly where sports is a hard hit industry. But I do think coming out of, like, Americans and really humans are incredibly resilient. And so I think that resilience will demonstrate itself in so many different ways. We see it with the healthcare workers and first responders who really, as we would all agree, are heroic, right? And I just think, it's the sports business that's going to have a lot of challenges, but out of those challenges are going to come other innovations and other things that no one had ever thought of. So I think what you got to do in this situation is pivot and try and find a way to reinvent the opportunity for what it is that you do. These are unprecedented times. I mean, the idea that the country's been shut down for 2 months has never happened before. And, for us in our industry, it's going to have a long-lasting impact, because I think live events for the next 12 to 36 months are going to be really challenged. It was getting harder to sell tickets to begin with because of all the great options of things to do out there, not to mention in media. But now I think live events will be a challenge. But in those challenges, I think you're going to see some of the greatest innovation. And even you might see some playoff formats that, you might not otherwise ever tested out before in hockey or the NBA, or as you pointed out in baseball. I mean, how great would a single elimination hockey playoff be? I mean, I was thinking about this, right? When we were growing up, it was 2 out of 3 and 3 out of 5 and then 4 out of 7, which I found to be a 2 out of 3 series was a lot more thrilling because the games mean more. But they could sell 7 games, broadcast 7 games. The money led you to 4 out of 7.
Of course.
But now with a more condensed schedule, single eliminations, different type of tournaments, you could see some innovations coming out of here that you might not have otherwise would have looked at.
I mean,
we might even see a short, it'd be hard to say, but do you really need 162 games? The answer is you need 162 games because that's the way it's always been. That's what the economic model is built off of. But boy, that 100-game season might be pretty compelling. In the same way, Steve Koonin, who runs the Atlanta Hawks, said we should start the NBA and go from December to June. Well, they can't do it economically. But now you're going to be forced to do some things that you wouldn't want to otherwise do. And there may be some great ideas that come out of it. And so I think, you can sit there and it's devastating what's happened. And so many people have been sick and died and so many people's lives are being ruined. And that's true. And I feel terrible about it. But you can help others and you can figure out how can I reinvent this opportunity and come out bigger and stronger out of it. I mean, I think that's the only way you can do it. And I find people to be very resilient. So hopefully the resiliency and innovative nature of America and the world will shine through here. You have to be hopeful.
Well, I want to talk specifically to 2 groups out there right now. The first group I want to talk to, talking about resiliency, is I want to talk to all the frontline workers and just, keep on thanking them. Every night, 6:45, we go to our local Huntington Hospital. I've been involved with Huntington Hospital for about 5 years now with fundraising for them. I help run the golf event and MC it and do the auction for them every year. And it's been amazing to see the community support for the frontline workers. We actually just, we made a t-shirt that just says elevate and thank you heroes on the back. That's on my personal Facebook page. Anybody who wants to buy that, we're using that money to go directly to the frontline workers and helping them out. So I want to thank all of them. The CEO of Huntington Hospital, Dr. Nick, he stopped by to actually say thank you to the people who were saying thank you to them. Yesterday was super emotional when we went there. They had the bagpipers there. It was unbelievable. So thank you to all the frontline workers. And as a son of a nurse who was a nurse for 40 years, listen, it's everything. So we appreciate it.
When you think of your mom, they're heroes. These people are heroes. What's your definition of a hero? The frontline workers, the medical professionals, the nurses, the doctors. In this world today, they're your definition of a hero, which is inspiring. And from a terrible thing, you have to take away some of the good things, which is just, these are they're real heroes. Those people are real heroes.
And then the second group I want to talk to is, all the families out there who, if you're a student athlete or the parent of a student athlete, think of what George just said. Think about the resiliency. Think about talking about pivoting. We've had top coaches here. We've had coaches like Jenny Levy and John Danowski, who have both coached Team USA. Listen to what they're saying. The players who are working now, who are going to come out of this at the end versus those who are just sitting home and not doing anything, you're going to differentiate yourself at a whole nother level. Thinking about what you're talking about with Drew, he's taking tests on his playbook. He's working out, eating, all the things that he's doing so that when he comes out of this, he's going to be one of the top prospects at quarterback for Notre Dame. That's where you need to be, people. That's what you need to be doing every day here.
You got to get better. You got to take it to your advantage, and you got to figure out, everyone's competing. So am I working harder than the person I'm competing with? And in some cases, if you're in high school and you want to go on to college, you don't even know who the person is you're competing with. But the question is, am I doing more than that person? And it's that time when you're not on the field that really, to me, makes the difference. Bigger, stronger, faster. Right now, you can impact all that. You got to take advantage of the opportunity.
We had Kylie O'Miller on the show. She's the NCAA all-time leading point scorer, 3-time All-American, Tewaaraton Award finalist. the accolades are just off the charts for her. And she said a great story. She said she's now a women's professional lacrosse player. She's kind of the face of women's lacrosse now. Big sponsorship deal with New Balance. And one of the things that Kylie had to say was, I was talking about one of her biggest regrets, and her biggest regret was not winning a national championship, and how she got knocked out of the playoffs by one goal, 2 different occasions on the last game of the season. And she said, now when I do reps, I do 2 extra reps, 1 to tie that game and 1 to win it.
Right. Well, of course, you learn a lot when things don't go well too. And again, that's taking a negative and making it a positive, right? Taking a negative experience, a big loss, and using it as a motivational tool to get better. And that's what winners do. Winners don't stay down very long. Like I said, you get knocked down, you get back up. You get knocked down, you get back up. That's what athletes do.
Yeah, I love it. So last question for you today, George. So, once again, what I wanted to do with the Elevate Academy was to be able to bring you guests like George, who just bring a wealth of experience. My God, how many nuggets did you give us today? Just phenomenal. But our last question for you is, what's the best piece of advice you ever received, and who gave it to you?
I think I said it earlier. There were a couple. I'll give you a couple. One was Gordy Lockbaum.
One of the best football players ever. Holy Cross, played every position pretty much.
He told me once, it's never as good. Things are never as good as you think they are, or as bad as they are. I thought that was good advice. And then the other one, more for business.
Wait, stay on Gordy for 1 second. So he was at Holy Cross. He played offense, defense. He punted too, right?
I don't think he punted, but he was a finalist for the Heisman for 2 years in a row.
Right, from Holy Cross, finalist for Heisman. I loved watching him play. So inspiring.
He was a great athlete. And then the other advice I got was more for business, but was good. So my last day at work, I went to lunch with Bill France and Jim France, who were both billionaires and owned NASCAR. And then Bill was there. One was late 60s, early 70s. And they took me to lunch at Steak and Shake. And we were coming home from lunch, and I said, what would be the one piece of advice I gave your coach? What advice would you give me? And they were Southern, Southern drawl, and the only way they could say it, they go, know when to squeeze and know when not to squeeze. And that was really good advice of knowing when to push for something and when not to push for something, and be smart enough to figure out that balance. That was really good advice. So those are my 2 pieces of advice that have stuck with me. And then as a parent, the one I said earlier that I like, a friend of mine who's coaches at the University of Florida football, has said, because your best is good enough. I think if you really say, hey, man, I try my best, that's all anybody can do. So if I tell my boys, I'd say, hey, when you play, your best is good enough. Just try your best. Whatever happens, who cares? Try your best. Awesome. And even at work for me, I don't worry a lot, because I really do feel like I try my best, and I made a lot of mistakes like everybody else. But if you try your best, it's all you can do, right? So that's all you can do.
Well, listen, this has been absolutely fantastic, both for me, all the listeners out there. George Pyne, unbelievable interview. Thanks for taking the time to join us here on the Elevate Academy. And everyone, we will see you on Friday with Digit Murphy, and we'll hear about her from the new president of the Toronto Women's National Hockey League franchise. So, George, thanks again, buddy. This has been great.
My pleasure. Go Bears.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
Take care.
Keep elevating.